At 12 minutes past noon, over the imperial capital of Valis Prime, 3 billion citizens looked up as our midday sun was swallowed whole by pitch-black metal. Our planetary defense grid did not fail from enemy fire. It collapsed because the human fleet jumping in a low orbit carried more physical mass than the crust of our own moon. 48 hours earlier, our High Council had officially classified humanity as a primitive dirt-bound species. Now, standing on the observation spire with our sun completely erased from the sky, my hand shook as the telemetry officer whispered the one question no Imperial model could answer. Where did a primitive world find the steel to build 3,000 dreadnoughts in the dark? This is Galactic Archive Entry 309, the Eclipse of Valis Prime. 2 days before our sky went black, I was standing on the bridge of the Imperial battlecruiser Sovereign Dawn, orbiting the 4th planet of the Sol system. The Valari hegemony does not negotiate with pre-warp civilizations, nor do we request permission to annex newly charted systems. For 3,000 years, our expansion has followed a single, unyielding mathematical doctrine. If a species has not mastered hyperdimensional folding or established permanent stellar slipstream gates across 3 separate star clusters, they're designated as Class 1 biologicals, primitive, ground-tethered, and legally subject to imperial assimilation. Humanity fit every single box on our registry. Their homeworld, a fragile blue marble wrapped in atmospheric vapor, showed fewer than 200 orbital stations. Their long-range communications were still crawling through the void at the speed of light. When our 70 battlecruisers dropped out of hyperspace above their orbital relays, we expected the usual reaction we had seen on 100 other worlds. Panic, frantic radio broadcasts begging for mercy, and an immediate unconditional surrender within the hour. I descended to the primary orbital station over their northern hemisphere, flanked by 12 heavy shock troopers in ceremonial gilded armor. I expected to meet a terrified planetary council on their knees. Instead, sitting alone inside an unshielded observation deck, drinking a steaming dark liquid from a chipped ceramic mug with worn blue glaze, was an older human male in a plain gray naval uniform. His collar bore 5 worn silver stars. His hair was streaked with iron, and his dark eyes were completely still as he looked up at my 4-meter imperial presence. His name was Grand Admiral Kenneth Vance. High Overseer Malachar Voth, he said quietly, setting his ceramic mug onto the steel table with a dull clink. He didn't stand. He didn't reach for a sidearm. His voice lacked even a tremor of elevated heart rate. You took your time getting past Saturn. I unfurled the golden imperial scroll, projecting the holographic glyphs of Decree 9402 across the glass pane. Human, I announced, my dorsal crest flaring with the natural authority of the hegemony. By decree of the High Council of Valis Prime, this system and all its orbital resources are hereby annexed under imperial sovereignty. You are given 48 standard planetary hours to dismantle your military satellites, clear your orbital lanes, and submit your planetary population for census and mineral quota distribution. If you resist, your orbital infrastructure will be vaporized from orbit, and your cities reduced to ash. Admiral Vance leaned back in his chair. He looked past my gilded armor, past the 70 battlecruisers bristling with plasma lances in the sky behind me, and looked directly into my multifaceted ocular lenses. You didn't scan the asteroid belt on your way in, did you? Vance asked. Sub-Inquisitor Tarek, standing to my left, let out a dry, clicking laugh through his mandibular plates. Your outer system is composed of useless carbonaceous rock and nickel iron dust, primitive. It holds no strategic value for the Grand Fleet. Vance smiled faintly. It was a cold, tired expression that sent an unnatural chill through my spine. He glanced down at the chipped ceramic mug in his calloused hand, his thumb tracing the worn edge where the clay showed through the glaze. To you, it's rock, Vance said softly. To us, it's steel. You called us primitives because we lived in the gravity well. You forgot that once we climbed out of the dirt, we never stopped building. He stood up, picked up his mug, and turned toward the window. You have 48 hours to return to your capital world of Valis Prime, Vance said, his back turned to 70 capital warships. Look at your own sky when the clock runs out. If you have ever been underestimated by someone who thought they had all the power, tell me in the comments where you are listening from across the galaxy. I returned to the Sovereign Dawn, convinced the human commander had lost his mind to fear. We jumped back to the imperial capital of Valus Prime, our mission declared complete. On our grand homeworld, 48 light-years away, life carried on under the brilliant radiance of our twin suns. 3 billion citizens walked the open-air crystalline terraces, and the High Council convened to plan the exploitation of Earth's oceans. At hour 24, the first anomaly hit our long-range surveillance array. Sub-Inquisitor Tarek rushed to my private sanctuary in the Grand Spire, his iridescent plumage completely pale, his hands trembling over his datapad. "High Overseer," Tarek stammered, his breathing slits wheezing in panic. "The Sol System surveillance probes, they have gone silent. Did the primitives launch surface-to-space missiles?" I demanded. "No, Overseer," Tarek replied, projecting the final sensor logs into the chamber. "The probes weren't destroyed by weapons fire. They were crushed by gravitational displacement. Look at the mass readings in their asteroid belt." I stared at the telemetry stream, and for the first time in my 300-year life, my predatory instincts screamed in sheer terror. Tarek had pulled the archival records on human history, trying to understand what our scanners were seeing. For 10,000 years, humanity had fought brutal, desperate wars across the surface of their homeworld, clawing through mud and blood over tiny patches of soil and scarce veins of iron. But when they finally broke through their atmospheric ceiling, their psychology didn't evolve into peaceful philosophy like the elder species of the Council. Instead, they looked out at the infinite blackness of space and saw one thing: unlimited material. Where our hegemony saw barren rubble, humans saw 10 quadrillion tons of unrefined nickel, cobalt, and platinum floating freely in zero gravity. Where imperial shipwrights spent 8 centuries carefully crafting warships one by one with artisanal guilds, humanity built automated, self-replicating von Neumann foundries that consumed entire planetoids in months. "We thought they were like the solitary salvage crews from the old Voss provision files," Tarek whispered, his claws digging into the terminal. "We thought they were like the lone, decommissioned cruisers from the Vigil records. We had no idea what they were doing in the dark." The planetary asteroid belt between their 4th and 5th planets was no longer an unorganized field of tumbling stone. Over the last 80 years, while humanity pretended to crawl slowly across their inner planets, thousands of automated smelters, powered by solar mirrors spanning hundreds of kilometers, have been chewing through millions of tons of ore every single hour. They had not built a navy. They had built an industrial monster that forged dreadnoughts the way an anthill breeds workers. "Tarek," I whispered, the words catching in my throat. "How many vessels were in production?" "The sensor array couldn't finish the count," Tarek croaked, his crest trembling violently. "The last recorded signature logged 3,200 capital-class kinetic dreadnoughts, and they had all initiated warp coil charging. If you love original cinematic sci-fi and stories where humanity proves the galaxy wrong, take a moment to subscribe to Kaelvorn and join our archive." The countdown reached 48 hours precisely at noon. I stood on the highest parapet of the Imperial Palace on Valus Prime. The sky above was a flawless, cloudless canopy of violet and gold, illuminated by our twin suns. Below me, millions of citizens gathered in the public plazas, preparing to celebrate the annexation of another backward world into the Empire. Then, the air grew freezing cold. A sound like tearing fabric echoed through the upper atmosphere. Not an explosion, but the violent displacement of space-time as 3,000 slipstream vectors opened simultaneously across our orbital envelope. The light began to fade. It did not dim slowly like a natural dusk. It was severed. Above the golden towers of Valus Prime, an endless, unbroken wall of black metal slammed into reality. Ship after ship, each one 4 kilometers long, blocky, unpainted, and scarred by raw forge welds, locked in a stationary low orbit. They did not come in formation. They came in an unbroken ocean of steel that stretched from the eastern horizon to the western mountains. The sun was gone. Total, pitch-black night descended upon 3 billion people in a fraction of a second. The automated streetlights of the capital flickered on, casting a sickly yellow glow over millions of upturned, terrified faces. Above us, the underbellies of 3,000 human dreadnoughts formed an artificial ceiling of guns, missile silos, and glowing blue reactor vents. Our planetary defense cannons, designed to engage fleets of 50 or 60 ships, spun in blind confusion. The targeting computers crashed repeatedly under the sheer density of radar returns. A single planetary-wide transmission cut across every screen, every holoprojector, and every audio receiver in the Valari hegemony. Grand Admiral Kenneth Vance appeared on the massive display above the Imperial Council chambers. He was still wearing the same worn gray uniform, and in his right hand, he was still holding the chipped ceramic mug with the worn blue glaze. Valari High Council. Vance's voice echoed across a pitch-black world, steady and unhurried. 48 hours ago, you stood in my sky and told me that humanity was a primitive species destined for chains. You looked down on our dirt. He raised the chipped ceramic mug slightly, letting the camera catch the rough red clay exposed beneath the chipped rim. This mug was baked from the red clay of my grandfather's farm on Earth, Vance continued, his eyes piercing through the broadcast. It is ordinary dirt from the gravity while you mocked. We carried that dirt into the asteroid belt, so we would never forget why we built this armada. We did not build 3,000 dreadnoughts to conquer your empire. We built them so no one would ever burn our mud again. He took a slow sip, his gaze locking onto the terrified High Council. You called us primitives because we lived in the gravity well. You forgot that once we climbed out of the dirt, we never stopped building. The 3,000 dreadnoughts above did not fire a single plasma bolt. Instead, on Vance's command, every ship simultaneously primed their kinetic macro cannons and fired a single blank magnetic shockwave into the upper ionosphere. The atmospheric thunder rattled the crystalline spires of the city, shattering the stained glass of the Imperial throne room in a single, deafening roar of defiance. Consider your decree revoked, Vance said calmly. Sol is closed to Imperial expansion. If an Imperial warship enters our outer perimeter again, we will not bring our fleet to your sky. We will bring our foundries. The transmission cut to black. With a unified flash of blue Cherenkov radiation, 3,000 human dreadnoughts folded space and vanished back into the void. The midday sun blazed back into the sky, blinding 3 billion citizens who remained frozen on their knees in absolute, horrified silence. The High Council never spoke of Annexation Decree 9402 again. 20 years later, the hegemony officially codified the Sol Perimeter Accord, known colloquially across every trade route as the Eclipse Doctrine. It established a 50-light-year quarantine zone around the Sol system, recognizing humanity not as a primitive biological subject, but as the one sleeping giant the galaxy must never provoke. Sub-Inquisitor Tarek left the fleet that year, spending the rest of his life studying human industrial history. In his personal memoirs, archived in the Great Vault of Valus Prime, he wore a small replica of a ceramic cup around his neck and wrote a single line that summarized the day our sun went black. Other species fight wars with soldiers and ships. Humanity fights wars with the inexhaustible wrath of their foundries. Do not wake the builders. Galactic Archive Record 309 closed. Codified Law. The Sol Perimeter Accord / Eclipse Doctrine. Codified year 3442. Cross-reference restricted. Thank you for listening to this original Kaelvorn HFY Sci-Fi story. If you believe humanity's greatest strength lies in our ability to build through any storm, leave a like, share this story, and subscribe to Kaelvorn for new cinematic episodes weekly. Until next time, remember, nothing in the void stays primitive forever.